The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man makes the world adapt to himself. So all progress depends on the unreasonable. That paradigm cannot play out anywhere other than in venture capital. Daily, every morning, it's true. And so it's not about the exceptions. Exceptions तो सब जगह है. हमारे business में सब जगह रोज every entrepreneur who makes it big, I believe, my limited lifetime that I've seen is an exception to some rule or the other. That's the nature of the world. You have to be exceptional to make something really massive and impactful. So that facet apart, it allows you to actually shape, if you want to, the world in a certain direction.
What does it take to identify and back the next big thing in the world of startups? How do venture capitalists navigate the complex web of risk and rewards to make successful investments? Welcome to the 1% Project, where we continue our exploration of the world of startups and venture capital with the visionary Karthik Reddy, co-founder and managing partner of Blume Ventures. In part 1 of our conversation, we learned about Karthik's upbringing, the values that he has instilled in Blume, the role of venture capital in fostering innovation, the X-Unicorn hypothesis, and more. In part 2 of our conversation with Karthik, we delve deeper into the world of venture capital. Listen in to explore Karthik's approach to investing, his counterintuitive insight about venture capital, how he identifies exceptional founders, concepts, and frameworks that have influenced him in his career, and much more. Tune in to the 1% Project for another engaging conversation with Karthik, and don't forget to subscribe to our Think newsletter at 1%.live, which brings highly curated content that adds value to your professional and personal life. Stay till the end, where I summarize the top 3 takeaways from the conversation with Karthik. We continue the conversation with Karthik in part 2 by asking him why he built Blume.
It goes back to 2-3 principles or beliefs that have been shaped in the first 35 years. I started Blume when I was 37. And capitalism rocks. It can't have a title that says capital and not believe in that. So if it does, then you believe that the only way to make the world a better place is through capitalism. However, again, spec in the universe problem, no one cares about your version of capitalism. It's a generally accepted version of capitalism, which, as I told you, I had problems with various facets. Crony capitalism being one, but like in general, I have problems with money for the sake of money. And you can be, on the other hand, idealistic, try to go change the world, as we say, and I say that I will go and save farmers, and I will go save the planet, and I will reduce waste, and I will allow for like better quality of life. And I said, you can do all that with this beautiful tool called venture capital. So that intuitive coming together of all of these senses is why I fell in love with it in the first place. And I saw it in its most ridiculous state in the US in 99. Everything came crashing in 2000. But I think that's where, again, I feel to have humility, to know that this is all like Maya, and you want to distill what is important to you, your core, is my superpower. And for myself, not for the world. I said that in the early part of the conversation as well. It's what gives me pleasure. So the act of extracting that pleasure is what made me a student of this facet, this aspect of venture capital. What can technology do to improve lives? And then you apply it in the context of India. My God, the scale, as like everyone jokes about it, but like, you tell me which other mechanism you have for capacity building to solve problems. You can get a kick. You can be Prime Minister Modi and get a kick and say, run the country and it's improved. That's not me. I'm not a scaled administrator or a policymaker or a politician. I can't see myself becoming that. The only other place you can do that, dramatic statement, I'm thinking whether I'm making an absurd statement. Motherhood statement, only other place we can do that in unthinkable scale is venture capital. No, and that's, again, like I've seen my esteemed peers at private equity say that's what we do. Capital formation, like giving a lot of jobs, industry. No, it's all true. So when you provide capital, we come with that mindset. It's a positive thing. That they're also enabling country, the industry, people, everything to grow in some sense. That's the role that capital plays. So that's what we debate with the government as well. Everyone thinks facilitating certain elements of financial services or public markets is good enough. That's the health of the economy. Actually, it's not. What's building the economy is infrastructure finance, private equity capital, and venture capital. So in that spectrum, let's assume for a minute, everybody's doing it for the right reasons. And so then all become equally important, if you ask me. The reason we do what we do is, as I said, we're able to shape two things at the same time, which the other two definitely cannot. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So one is to take technology, market, regulatory risks that they're not able. And it goes back to that famous quote that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable man makes the world adapt to himself. So all progress depends on the unreasonable. That paradigm cannot play out anywhere other than in venture capital. Daily, every morning, it's true. And so it's not about the exceptions. Exceptions the subject है. हमारे business में subject every entrepreneur who makes it big, I believe, in my limited lifetime that I've seen, is an exception to some rule or the other. Okay, so that's the nature of the world. You have to be exceptional to make something really massive and impactful. So that facet apart, it allows you to actually shape, if you want to, the world in a certain direction. So you can be like, to credit to the folks who are doing only climate tech or only agri-tech. They're shaping those industries. They're helping shape those industries and that future. So it's capacity building of the change you want to see of the world is why, an idealist venture capital should exist. And that's us in our naive, foolish way, as I do believe is still idealist 12 years, right? And I think that's why we exist. That's what brings me to work. And why we want to continue that is I feel like very empowered to see part two, actually, which is interesting, is that you can propagate a new school of thought, new form of entrepreneurship, new role models in a way that nobody else can. So let's say you go and look at 10 companies you admire, you ask somebody on the street, is there a common thread between the 10? There usually will never be. So now I've set myself a new goal. I think, like I joke about it, but the day I retire would be when I see 10 such companies with the common thread, which I can go and ask. Not, they'll be different if you go ask someone on the street, but if I go and put these 10 names and they say, oh, I respect 8 of them, or they've returned money in the public markets or something, and they've lasted for 15, 20 years, 25 years. The minute I have about 10 of them, I'll say I've done my job. Because then you've left enough role models for my team, for some kid who's being born today, will be invested out by Blume Fund 10 or 11. So you've set that stage. And I think that's the thrill of doing this ground up in India, as opposed to just plugging into a job in another VC firm. It's not like I didn't try. I tried in 6-7. Nobody wanted to hire me. And so I went to the media side. And I couldn't fall out of love with this idea. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I went and started, and then life's taken over.
What is your counterintuitive insight about venture capital?
Okay, actually, it's not counterintuitive, but I think that's how we've evolved. Anybody would have told us, and a lot of people did tell us, I don't think we believed them, is that the industry of venture capital as a mechanism of financing entrepreneurship is a very elite form of financing. You can't democratize that, sadly, not in the way it exists. You can have, like, the US has small business loans program. India has, SIDBI, NSIC, banks. Sadly, those will back, again, traditional business models. Even at micro scale. दुकान को भी मैं vegetable vendor को भी पैसा दिया, शाम तक पैसा वापस चाहिए. So he's using it for intraday working capital. So that cannot be ever venture capital. But what venture capital can do, interestingly, is even innovate on those such models, which is what fintech is trying to do at some levels. And I hope the government understands that, yes, regulate them, but please see that only they can fix it. Because costs of distribution, costs of managing the risk, costs of observing, cost of exit, all these are not possible in small, 99.999% of enterprise. So you can have millions of entrepreneurs and brag about it. How do they actually get better? How do they build capacity? How do they build scale? Very challenging. They will stay lifestyle entrepreneurs. So that we knew. What we didn't realize is how absurd the game can become in terms of the scale to which things have to be built for that to become meaningful for the venture capital industry. So ये 20, 30, 40, 50 million के जो outcomes आते हैं, it's not small. You think about a 300 crore outcome, it probably creates more wealth impact than, with no disrespect to the Kirana shopkeepers, it creates more impact than 100 of them put together, let's say. However, that still doesn't move the needle for a venture capital, because the size of outcome you require for it to become meaningful for the greed of capital that we have to manage. And if you want to build a firm and an industry, you have certain cost structures, you have to have certain aspiration levels. People come in saying, I want to manage so much money. So you will not get the talent you want to for something very difficult to do if you don't set up all of those levers. You can't ask people to come and work for free. So if you want to build a competitive industry, sadly, you have to right size everything in the industry. And for right sizing funds which are ambitious like ours, you have actually pushed the needle further away from with every, I would argue, you've knocked away 40-50% of the kind of entrepreneurs we would have backed in the previous one. So it's an elite sport. To be like, the bar keeps getting higher. At least in JE, if you have the same common skills, you can compete on this level playing field. Here, the bar just keeps getting higher because it's not about entry level. It's about only exit level that matters. It's like judging the JE student to say, आप life में क्या बनोगे 35 पे, उसके हिसाब से आपको admission देता. And that is basically how the odds are like that, which is, yes, it's unfair. A lot of kids come in like, it's so elitist, you can't get in, you need a sifarish to get introduced to a good fund. Yeah, all of it is true. What do you do? So it goes against that one aspect of that idealism, which, like, can I help more? Can I do more? And you realize, no, you can't. You have to limit yourself. Reserve your time, your sanity, your whatever little hours you can give to your family, and to serve the biggest my baap of all, which is your investors. That's why you exist. So unless you make them enough money through a viable, you won't exist. You'll become a social service worker. No disrespect to them. We are not for profit.
That's fascinating, and I think that's very truthful. It's an elitist game. It's very hard to break in. You talked about people coming and saying that they can't get in. When somebody walks in Blume, Trinity, what do you look for in them?
I've answered this probably 100 times in a decade, so it'll only be a variant of that, sadly. I think a lot of the other questions you asked had aspects of things that, which I probably may or may not have expressed in the same way ever before. So thanks for those questions. On this one, it's a cookie cutter question. And sadly, the answer is fairly cookie cutter, in the sense that it's not different from what I might have said over 10, 12 years. It only keeps improving because you have a little bit more sophistication in the way you pick. And it's also not very different from how most good VCs pick. They might have variants to it, but it's all about the same. So what are those? And I'll put it in my words, and another VC might put it in different words, but it's about the same. So we over-index on origin stories of the problem. Why are they trying to solve this problem? Until all the entrepreneurship I grew up with in life was, how does it make money? That was important for a business to exist. That was the raison d'etre for business. I'm actually not looking for that initially. I'm looking for the raison d'etre of this business being built by this founder. So that's one. And as much as we talk about multiple people in the co-founding team, etc., nobody sells it better than one person. Two people cannot sell it equally well. That's another realization, harsh realization. So who's that person? Because, while you say it's cool to have 4-member founding teams, 8% independent, sadly. They might be great husband-wife equivalent in the team. That does not mean one of them doesn't wear the pants in the house. Right? The wife might, but I need to know that it's the wife, because then we're backing that vision. And that's the person who can spar with, can debate with, who will make it memorable or not. Therefore, over-indexing on the founder, key founder, seeing that they know they're not oblivious, they just don't have lackeys around them who sit nice and quiet, but really don't actually add to the value or to them. That's why the co-founding team matters, not because they can all sell the same vision. And why are they solving this problem? And how obsessed are they about the problem? The ones who fall in love with their solution now, the worst founders to back. Because in early stage, आपका solution पता ही नहीं है आप. हवा है. Solution market will tell you. अगर solution पता होता, then you're again doing a cookie cutter business. Someone comes and say, ये app है, देखो इसमें ये features है. उससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है? User use कर रहा है या नहीं? That in our stage you can't. This will be very evident in B and C rounds. It won't be evident in pre-series A. So therefore, we like this over-obsession. We find, and I'll tell you the second reason for this. We've realized that people get tired of the businesses they run. They get weakened by setbacks. They erode. They give up. Say, okay, good journey, but like I can't handle it anymore. But the person who started it for the right reason discovers the problem, goes deeper and deeper, discovering the deeper and deeper problem. Sometimes, I will admit, sometimes more obsessed by creating a large-scale impact through their firm rather than actually the very original problem that they pitched us. But that resilience and that obsession is still in some capacity. So that's why I said there are all sorts of exceptions, but at least starting point, they should have the same obsession. That's what will keep them going. So otherwise you can't build 10, 20-year firms. It's BS again, which is why most co-founders leave halfway. They don't stick around. Why is that? Not just because they're being undermined or whatever. You get bored of either the job or their role or the fact that they're not as passionate about building the problem to the next scale. Eventually, everybody should get bored because it becomes monotonous as a job. The innovation has gone down to somewhere else, right, in the firm. And so the cash cow firm, the public firm, etc., should be run by professionals there. It should be on autopilot. But this is the kind of DNA we're looking for, because even at that level, they should have instilled enough culture in the firm that you can hire so easily into that culture and never lose sight of the original culture. Continue to build a great firm, and they can still sit on the beach 12 years down. There's a lot of asks of somebody you've met for 20 minutes. And so what happens typically is, therefore, we try to gauge as much of this using gut in the first 20, 25, 30 minutes. And if you don't get this guts, like that, I need to know more about this person, you should never do it, in our opinion. If you do get it, you should try and poke holes in it for the next 10 hours of meeting. That's the diligence of a founder. And the last thing, which is very important, you have to have a view on the market. The market is something that the founder has a view, but sometimes is actually, believe it or not, I feel a naive view than even the VC. Because they don't understand it from a TAM market perspective. They only understand from the problem they're obsessed about. But I need to have a view on whether that problem becomes large enough as a market opportunity. And if they might say, no, I don't know that, but I'll go build something else in the extended market. And they have to have that courage, but they should have that knowledge as well. And so your view on the market is, I think, what makes the journey, again, really, really memorable outside bets come from a combination of the two whenever we have looked back. And I'm not a genius. I'm not writing consulting reports on it. Again, you have an intuition on the market. That's what shapes an early stage VC's life every 3 years, every 2 years in life. It keep recalibrating, helps you stay young, but that's the only reason, again, you have this job. Because you have to reinvent yourself every 2-3 years. Because relevant 3 years ago is useless.
3 books or blogs that have influenced you the most?
I'm never like a random access memory. So these random access memory questions always trip me up, not because I can't give an answer, but I'm sure I'm missing good answers of that in them saying. I think I'm going to stick to the easy idealistic one. So Black Swan, Talib, a very interesting chapter around how outsized outcomes come from edgy, almost artistic bets in life. And again, there's a lot of my theory around why venture capital is, why we do what we do, comes from that. What I gleaned again from Black Swan. Everybody else took away very different things from it. But for me, that was very life-changing. It's not one or the other. I'll just give a credit for philosophy was like Ayn Rand on capitalism in general. Very collegey answer, but the reality was that's what shapes your view on your belief in markets and, absurdly capitalistic view. Though I don't know what she said, but these are important frameworks forming it. And the third, I would say, is these frameworks that I just described, maybe. So let's give them came from adapting Mark Andreessen's framework of product market team. And so I cite it a lot. I gave him credit when I wrote my Fund 2 Kicker blog. So every time we raise a new fund and launch it in the public domain, we accompany it with a blog. So the Fund 2 blog will have all options to taking Andreessen's framework and adapting it to an Indian context. So that informs my day-to-day life. So let's give him credit for that.
3 productivity tools.
Simplifying concept returns and why we do venture capital is like this notion of 25% IRR. When things have to compound at 25% IRR, how scary do they look in terms of multiples? So that allows me you asked me about risk, and that allows me to frame all risk. So reveal it here, as everybody knows it, but a 2-bagger in 3 years is 25% IRR. A 3-bagger in 5 years is 25% IRR. You do every combination of 2x's and 3x's and number of years, and you can actually do the math very quickly on how outsized this outcome should be. So I know what it should be in 7 years. I know what it should be in 8 years. I know what it should be, what 25% means compounded 10 years. So that's one tool which I use all the time to frame my decision-making around risk. Let's just, so you say, इतना कुछ करते हो क्या modeling है सब this framework is because then it allows you to distill backward on how big the revenue should be, etc. The tool that I would like is not geographic optimization has not been good. I've tried to actually custom build it using a team in the middle of Blume. I backed a company which I thought would build it for me, which hasn't happened. So what I mean is like I'm an optimization geek. So my geography is probably like one in a million kind of geographic optimization in the country. And nothing solves, like for me, for anybody who wants to be top 1 in 100, if you ask me. There are no good tools around geographic optimization. They're all very laborious. You can map your whole life on Google Maps, but I don't like it. It doesn't stitch together contacts. It doesn't stitch together geographic contacts. I hate them. So I use all sorts of hacks. I go to LinkedIn, search by geography. If I'm going to Chicago, do I know anybody who's there? Etc. So between LinkedIn, Maps, etc., they're all disappointing. For something like a Google Keep more usefully, as my team of people who can assist me has increased, we do shared tasks. So that way, it's allowing me to be more prolific. I would like to give more credit to something like an Otter, which I also use, but I'm not being disciplined about leaving voice notes. A lot of tools, I think, to summarize, require you to adopt them with a passion and be very disciplined about using them. Otherwise, they lose their utility. And so for me, I think the time thing, I am a geek in that sense, I can be, but if I was relegated to a desk job, I would have been much better. Now, I'm not, so I find it very difficult to be loyal and super tuned to tools.
What is the kindest thing that anybody has done for you?
Yeah, same thing. I feel like maybe, again, random access memory is really bad. So I'm going to go with relevance of something that I said in the code. One macro generalist thing and one micro thing that came up in today's conversation so that people can contextualize. One is, I think, innumerable people stepped up. 10 times more people have said no when you go to raise money. As an entrepreneur, you can't count that as anything but like an incredible gesture of kindness. Because it's belief in you. I don't think it's about, they thought I'm a Twitch quick scheme and I'll make 10 times the money. So everybody who backed us through this is one or another type of gesture of kindness, to be honest. We simply saw our face, or they knew us, trusted us, believed in this mad mission and just gave us money. So it's too large an amount. It's like 100 crores like that. It's not a small amount of money. And nobody believed, no institutions believed in us. So it was all, I think there's a long list you can't go through. Yes, for some strange reason, because I'd applied for an MBA loan, the embassy rejected me twice. And that bans you from actually applying again. So there was someone who, because of his business influence in the US, actually had clout to at least put in a word. And so they tried two angles, and first one there also failed. And then eventually a sealed envelope was presented somewhere, and that's how I made it to the US. And sometimes I tell the wife what all fate had stored to make that meeting happen. Second day, interview, well wisher, but they didn't done that, right? It's so easy to say, what can I do if you don't get a lead? That changed the course of my life. So I think I'll take that credit.
And what advice will you give to your younger self?
Obviously, you tend to project a little on your own child. I have a 14-year-old now. And I think the advice has always been experiment much earlier in life with as many things as you can. And try to find what you really love much earlier in life. I think mine came from just slowly eliminating more things I didn't like, not having the opportunity to test what I like. Conventional upbringing, on both conservatism and upbringing, and not having capital to experiment. Now, my kid can't complain about that. I'm willing to sponsor the experimentation, but definitely, I think I had the initiative. I don't think I had the capital. That's why I ran away to the north. I needed to go and see the country. I needed to go and do things. I had 2 admissions in the south, but I wanted to break away. So I think it happened much later. Now the world's getting so fast paced and so current. You need to be so current with the times that I think you need to start thinking in that fashion, not about a job or an education, but generally playing that out much faster. Then I might have chosen the mad passion that I'm trying to run venture capital now. I might have chosen a very different track. So I was a sports buff, but I didn't do enough of it, as an example. So today, as a sports buff, everything is tough. All of us know that. You want to be at the top of your game, anything is tough. But I didn't experiment enough. I would have loved being a sports commentator, roam the world, and be the best at that. And that's what I would tell them. And I tried even as early as my brother was 5 years behind me. I would tell my parents, just enjoy football or whatever he wants to do and become a commentator. I think there's a profession in there, right? And somebody who started in the 90s, it would have looked absurd, but you could have been Harsha Bogle. So that, I think you have to constantly test yourself. Today, much more crowded. There are opportunities, but 10,000 people vying for it, more than they were in the 90s. More opportunities, but also those privileges have become more normalized. So which means you have to work doubly hard in discovering that. And that's what I would tell myself.
That's brilliant. Actually, before I close, I want to say a few days ago, I was telling somebody that I wish Harsha Bogle can come on the podcast.
He was meant to be mentioned today, I guess.
Karthik, this was an excellent conversation. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Karthik. Here are the 3 key takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, venture capital allows one to take on technology, market, and regulatory risks that other types of capital are not able to handle. It also allows us to shape the world in a certain direction and propagate new forms of entrepreneurship and role models. Number 2, venture capital is still an elite form of financing that cannot be easily democratized. And number 3, investors should over-index the founder's obsession with the problem and their ability to remain resilient in the face of setbacks. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who will find it valuable. And for recommendations and feedback, you can drop me a line at Pritish@1%.live. Until next time.